Hey everyone, I'm so glad you're joining me today because we are unpacking a truly complex and, honestly, a pretty urgent situation that's unfolding right now across the legal and educational worlds. In this explainer, we are looking at how a small town teacher's recent arrest is basically serving as the very first stress test for a sweeping, brand new state law. It's one of those cases that really forces us to look closely at the collision between digital communication, student safety, and the rapidly shifting boundaries of the modern classroom. Okay, let's dive into this. This chilling quote right here is pulled straight from the police report, the uniform citation, regarding a 14-year-old student down in Graves County, Kentucky, when law enforcement starts throwing around words like unauthorized and untraceable in relation to an adult communicating with a minor. Yeah, massive red flags immediately go up. And that single sentence is essentially the spark that ignited the entire investigation we're examining today. Part 1. The shocking allegations. A beloved teacher faces a sudden felony. Now, right off the bat, it is absolutely crucial to emphasize that the educator at the center of this, Sadie Flores, is currently only facing allegations. Under our legal system, she remains completely innocent until proven guilty. But these allegations are making waves because of who she appeared to be in her community. On one hand, her public life in Graves County seemed completely pristine, right? She was an LBD teacher, meaning she worked in special education with vulnerable students who face learning or behavioral challenges. She was a middle school volleyball coach, a wife married to her high school sweetheart, a mom, and a super active church member. But then, on the flip side of the ledger, she is now accused of a Class D felony involving secret meetups and manipulating a minor. It's this massive narrative tension that leaves everyone asking, how in the world did we get here? Part 2, the digital trail, what the parent found. You see, this entire investigation didn't start in a classroom, and it didn't start with a tip from a fellow teacher. It actually began behind closed doors when a parent decided to go through their 14-year-old's phone. So let's walk through exactly what they found. We're talking about messaging back and forth on platforms like Snapchat and TikTok. There were multiple late-night FaceTimes that the parent was completely in the dark about. And according to that uniform citation we mentioned, investigators determined these communications lacked any sort of legitimate purpose and were entirely non-school related. On top of all that, police claim it was determined the two actually met in secret before a school function. Obviously, these unapproved off-hours communication methods instantly sounded the alarm for both the parent and the local police. And that digital trail eventually culminated in this really stark assessment from investigators. They wrote that Flores was allegedly attempting to manipulate the minor and expressed feelings of love and admiration more so than just a student-teacher relationship. Because of what they found on that device, electronics were seized, multiple interviews were conducted, and Sadie Flores ultimately wound up spending the weekend in the Graves County Jail. Part 3, Kentucky's new grooming law, Statute 510.160. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this really isn't just a story about one middle school in one small county. This case is actually the testing ground for a massive macro legal trend. And what is truly staggering here is the timeline of events. Kentucky's brand new grooming law officially took effect on July 15th. It was heavily advocated for after a separate, incredibly tragic case in northern Kentucky, with the whole goal being to stop sexual abuse before it starts by criminalizing the lead-up behavior. Literally just days after this law hit the books, Flores allegedly began these untraceable communications. And a mere couple of weeks after that, she was arrested and charged under this brand new statute. It was that fast. So we really need to break down the legal jargon of the statute to understand how this happened. Under the new Kentucky law, grooming occurs when an adult in a position of authority, like a teacher, acts with the intent to entice a minor into sexual conduct. But here is the critical addition to the law. It also applies if the adult intends to develop an intimate or secretive relationship with the minor. That specific phrasing, intimate or secretive, is the exact key to Flores' arrest. There are no allegations of physical sexual abuse here. She is literally being charged for the nature of the digital relationship itself. And let me tell you, the stakes could not be higher, because this is a Class D felony involving a minor under the age of 14. If Sadie Flores is convicted, she's facing 1 to 5 years in state prison, plus up to a $10,000 fine. The legislature made absolutely sure this new law comes with some very severe teeth. Part 4, the legal gray area, intention versus interpretation. To really wrap our heads around the massive growing pains of a law this incredibly new, we have to look at the expert analysis of sex abuse attorney Chris Klatz. He weighed in heavily on the exact wording of this statute and pointed out a pretty major concern. The word intimate is never actually strictly defined in the law. So does intimate mean purely sexual, or does it just mean a close personal bond, kind of like you might have with a really trusted mentor? Because that wording is left completely open to interpretation, prosecutors and police suddenly have incredibly broad power to look at non-sexual but close relationships and label them as criminal behavior. As Klatz notes, this sort of vagueness is exactly what a defense lawyer is going to target in court. So the crucial point is how this actually applies to our modern technology. Under this new legal framework, simply having a non-sexual chat with a student on a private app, say Snapchat, Instagram, or Discord, instead of using an approved tracked school email, that could technically be prosecuted as building a secretive relationship. Think about that. The platform you choose to use could literally be the difference between innocent mentorship and a felony charge. But to really understand why this law was created in the first place, and to balance out those legal critiques, we have to look at a pretty staggering statistic. According to Klatz, in over 98% of physical sexual abuse cases, the abuse starts with this exact type of grooming behavior. It starts with checking in, testing those boundaries, and moving conversations over to secret, untraceable platforms. That overwhelming reality is exactly why lawmakers felt so compelled to write this protective law in the first place, to give police a way to intervene before a situation escalates to physical harm. Which, of course, forces us to ask a really difficult question. Where exactly is the legal line between a dedicated coach and a groomer? I mean, we've all had teachers or coaches who went out of their way to support us, right? Maybe they checked in on us when we were having a really tough day, or maybe they gave us a ride home from practice when our parents were working late. Under these new rules, how do we distinguish between an educator who is just deeply invested in a student's well-being and someone who is actively testing the waters of abuse? Part 5. The broader impact. Altering education forever. While the statute is very clearly designed to catch predators, we have to shift our focus for a second to the 99% of totally innocent educators out there. Because the Sadie Flores case serves as a massive warning sign. This is their new ultra-cautious reality. To protect themselves from a broadly worded felony charge, educators are going to have to maintain incredibly strict boundaries moving forward. Never friend a student on social media. Only communicate via tracked school-provided email channels. You might really need to reconsider giving a struggling kid an off-hours ride to practice. Teachers now have a very legitimate fear that simply checking in on a troubled student via a text message could be totally misinterpreted by law enforcement as a felony attempt to establish a secretive relationship. The school district itself is trying to navigate this incredibly thin tightrope. In the wake of the arrest, the Graves County superintendent released a very impartial statement, basically noting that their commitment remains to providing a safe, supportive, and effective learning environment. They fully cooperated with law enforcement because at the end of the day, student safety is the ultimate priority. But it's becoming very clear that the methods for achieving that safety are creating some incredibly complex and rigid new boundaries for everyone involved. Which brings us to our final thought for today. As states aggressively tighten these digital laws to catch predators before they can strike, will the 99% of innocent teachers be forced to just abandon after-hours mentorship altogether just to protect themselves? It's a profound societal cost we're going to have to weigh as the digital age continues to impact that sacred traditional bond between a teacher and a student. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those tough questions, and I will see you next time.